not just with this deal, but in many other facets. When you're out there and you're networking with people and you're sharing ideas and passions and everything, you just never know what's gonna come from it.
If you're an active real estate investor and you're looking to do larger deals, you're in the right place. We are going to go and take the conceptual type of stuff that you listen to from other real estate podcasts and bring it down to the tactical, the nitty gritty, the actual actionable types of things that other real estate investors that went big did to grow their own real estate empire. You're listening to the Go Big Live podcast. I'm your host, Matt Druin. What is up, everybody? My name is Matt Druin. I'm host of the Go Big Live Real Estate Investors podcast. I have a very special guest and close friend of mine, Mr. Orlando Ortiz. And the reason why I'm excited to have him on is we're a 40 under 40 alumni together. That's where we originally met. He started coming to my meetups. And I've just been really impressed to watch Orlando grow over the years. Started off in small multifamily, has been doing some big deals, actually part of the Go Big Mastermind with our fellow cohort of students in our program. And so we're going to go on today to hear about Orlando's story and how he did his big deal, 22 unit he just closed on just recently. Fresh in his mind, fresh battle scars to talk about today. So I want to welcome you on the show, Orlando. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Always a pleasure.
All right. So I like to start off the interview with, you were born and now you're here. What happened in between?
Well, a lot of things happen, I guess, if you want to say that, as we all do. We all have a story as to how we got to where we are today. Going back to where I was born in Puerto Rico and pretty much lived there until I was 10 years old. And at the time, we had some family relatives, some relatives here in Rochester. And my family decided to just do a 1-month vacation to visit relatives here and back in the early 90s. And we bought a round trip ticket to come to the States for the first time leaving the island. So that experience in itself was huge. And then a month went by and my parents were like, hey, we're just going to stay in Rochester. And that was the end of that conversation. So my dad went back, closed up the house and brought some of our belongings back. But it was a immediate kind of shift in our lives, right? From my brother and my sister to get acquainted to Rochester. We were fortunate enough to have family here. We had my uncles, I should say, multiple uncles that either own or worked at Rivera's Market and Rivera's Liquor Store on Bay and Bay and 2nd Street, provided us kind of a sense of that, family business. They ran a grocery store and a liquor store for 30 or 40 years. So very well known, members of the community, and provided a sense of that belonging for the Latino community since the 60s. So that allowed me to get acquainted with the entrepreneur side of things. And I always look back and say, that's kind of what I think gave me my mindset of entrepreneurship. And I started working there when I was like 11, 12 years old. I stayed working very loosely. I'm pretty sure he violated some labor laws or something, but it was nice to be able to be there a few hours a week just to kind of get that mindset of working hard and, and earning something, right, for my time. So I always appreciate that time when I was younger because I set the foundation of where I am today. And I attribute that to that early start. From there, I went to college. I went to RIT and MCC and RIT, got my engineering degrees. And that's where I started more of my career of engineering, which I did for 20 years. And we'll get to that transition a little bit later on. And in the last, I would say 12 years, I started getting into real estate through a couple of friends of mine, Carl and Mian, who gave me kind of that insight of, hey, let's start, they were already in real estate and they just asked me to join them in a couple of showings. And then I started getting into what is this, what is that, asking them questions. And next thing you know, I was buying my first property 12 years ago and kind of went out from there.
Yeah. So where are you at nowadays in terms of your portfolio and like your goals and how things have changed since then?
Yeah. So I would say initially it was more like a side hobby. The first few years, kind of buying 1 or 2 properties, doubles typically, and just kind of getting the lay of the land and getting feel of everything. And, obviously I was still working full time at Gleason Works at the time. And little by little, I started buying a triple, then a 4, a 5. And a few years ago, I got an 18, and then now recently the 22. So little by little, scaling up and understanding the business and seeing the benefits of scaling, right? And the economies of scale that provided me to be able to take care of something in one area. Along the lines, I would say the last seven years, I've had friends and colleagues that have been interested in real estate, but not necessarily had the time nor the experience to be able to manage it. So they asked me, "Hey, if I buy something, can you manage it for me?" And little by little, that became part of my business as well, through friends and referrals that wanted me to manage the property. So that it's, probably about 50%, maybe 60% of my business right now, where it's kind of 60-40. But long term, I want to continue to grow my portfolio so that I can, achieve my personal goals within the real estate side. It wasn't until maybe 3 years ago that I started really looking at this as hey, this could be my way out of the rat race per se, and be able to just do this full time. And through COVID, that's kind of what's a catalyst to kind of say, we put all the eggs in one, kind of like ducks in a row, I should say, to be able to retire from my full time career to be able to transition to real estate, which I did 100% back in end of May. So starting June 1st has been kind of my transition real estate, which has been a great, 4 or 5 months already. Obviously it's a different transition, but I've had the support of obviously my wife to be able to do this, and also of other folks like yourself and other mentors that have helped me along the way.
Excellent. So we're here to talk about big deals. You just closed on a 22 unit apartment building. Let's talk about that. I know that you're a huge relationship person. I mean, when we posted this on Facebook that we were going to have Mr. Orlando Ortiz on, we had people coming out of the woodwork. They're
Mhm.
like, really, you're a very strong member of your community. We talk about relationships a lot in our program and the value of those because we can't do this on our own. Nobody is self made. So this deal, in terms of its origin, came to you from another real estate
Mhm.
investor that had you in mind. What can you tell about like your because I want to talk about the origin of this deal. Knowing you for as long as I have, you kind of have that giver's gain ethos to you. So tell about that in terms of like, relationships and how you give back to the community and how that's helped you along your journey.
Yeah. So, and that's a very big part of what I do, right? It's a relationship piece, both on the business side from a investor or just community wise, but also on the tenant side, trying to continue in building those relationships. As we know, tenant relationships is huge in a good, good relationship with tenants and just being able to communicate, right? What I would say with this deal, yeah, it's something that not just with this deal, but in many other facets, when you're out there and you're networking with people and you're sharing ideas and passions and everything, you just never know what's gonna come from it. And this particular deal, I wasn't, necessarily looking for, or I didn't know where that relationship would lead at the time. And next thing you know, I'm being asked if I'm interested in a 22 unit off market deal. And initially, whoa, that's pretty big. But that's where I want to go to, especially with the courses and the mastermind that you and I are part of. So that was great initially. After the initial shock of wow, it's there for me to take, and then obviously running the numbers and everything after that. But it starts with that relationship piece and being able to just be at different rooms and tables, just exposing yourself to whatever can come out of it. Sometimes people think that just because you're somewhere, you have to have something to benefit from. And I just kind of always say yes to many things and good things come my way. So that's something that I've always valued, the relationship piece and being able to pay it forward. One of the things that a friend of mine just recently told me, and they said that I have drive and heart and, trying to trying to build something for those after me. And after me means it could be my family, it could be friends, it could be whoever, the community. I've always been willing to help whoever wants to put in the work too, right? We're not just gonna just give them everything, but helping along the way is something that I've been able to give forward. And that's something even going back to when I was younger. When we moved here from Puerto Rico, we really didn't have much, and a lot of people were giving to us. And I know my parents were heavily into the church and stuff like that. So just kind of having that mindset of paying it forward is always something that I value and I want to continue doing.
Now, Let's talk about I don't want to not talk about your involvement in the community. I mean, you do so much, right? You are the president of the Puerto Rican Festival. You're on the many boards of many nonprofits, the board of Pastone Housing Council and all that stuff. A lot of people kind of get things twisted. I had an agent back several years ago that was when I was an active broker that asked me, "Hey, should I get involved with this nonprofit because it'll be good for my business?" And what I asked him, I was like, "Well, are you passionate about what this nonprofit stands for?" Because if you go into something expecting some type of return out of it when you're giving, then it's usually not going to work out that way. It's just like that sort of thing where I believe that if you make positive deposits into the universe, into relationships, that whether it's God or universe or the universe will conspire to give you what you desire. So kind of tell me about that and your because you gave me a little bit about that. So many people gave so much to you guys when you came here, but tell me about that going forward and how those mysterious things have happened in your life.
Yeah, and you make a good point. And a lot of people just volunteer to do stuff, and you could be in part of 10 boards, but if you're not giving it your all, you're not passionate about what the work you're doing, it'll show in the involvement you have in the board meetings, the involvement in the meetings, just the overall communication that you're having with other board members. It'll definitely show something that I've always said that, especially with the Puerto Rican festival, right? I've been a part of that for 18 years. And initially, it was more like somebody saw something in me to say, "Hey, we really like what you're doing in terms of volunteering for the festival for a few years through your fraternity. Why don't you come on the board and be the volunteer coordinator at the time?" And I said, "Sure." I said, I always say a lot of yes to a lot of things that I really thinking through, but that was probably one of the better decisions I've made because it really aligned many of the things that I really enjoy. Obviously, my culture is one thing, the event planning, my engineering side of things, planning, and just my own personal growth as I began to learn. I learned a lot by being part of the festival board, and even more so when I became president, because it allowed me to not only give to the community, but when we talk about the things that I didn't expect to get back, was being out in public and speaking to the media and speaking to sponsors and just doing all this public facing things that help my professional side of things. Because when I was at work, I was doing speeches to auditorium or my team. I was doing team meetings, and it just became a lot more comfortable to do all those things. And I always say that the festival and other organizations were kind of like the sandbox per se, where you can kind of learn and try different things out while still being given to that organization. So I always looked at if you can meet the passion with maybe an area that you feel that you need to grow in, and you can marry those two things together. There's no shame in kind of saying, "Hey, yeah, I want to grow in this area, but I'm also passionate about this organization, and I can, develop myself and give back at the same time."
Yeah, 100%. Let's talk about the capital stack on this 22 unit deal, right? Tell me about purchase, rehab budget, how you put the deal together from a capital stack standpoint.
Yeah. So overall, I mean, it was when I say it was a shock, right? When somebody says 22 apartments, it's certainly you start thinking large numbers, and I did at first, right? When we came and we agreed on a budget of, no, I'm sorry, a price of $300,000. Whoa, how is that even possible? Like you got a dump, but it wasn't. Obviously, I'm very familiar with the areas and the demographics and the type of tenants that this particular property has. So it's nothing that, scared me away. And obviously you walk by with the unit with me or the property as well and gave me your own feedback. But, overall it was $300,000 at the time. 20 out of the 22 units were occupied. So, and the other two were just recently vacated and they were just doing turnover. So very high occupancy rate, which is obviously something you'd want in a acquisition like this. There's a lot of updates that needed to be done, right? The particular seller at the time had it for 15, 17 years and had done an extensive renovation back in the early 2000s and just kind of lived his life per se with some of the renovations. So one of the things we're doing right now is updating common area hallways, lighting, painting, flooring, that kind of thing, so that not only the tenants have a better feel of the place that they're living in, but also incoming tenants, that you kind of set a different expectation for the property. So in total, we have about a $75,000 a year budget for capital improvements in this
Mhm.
particular project. So we're definitely infusing, a lot of cash into the property. In terms of the structure, what I did was I developed an investor list that, I develop relationships, right, with over the time. It's almost in our class, right? In our mastermind, we talk about we got to develop the relationships so that when we need the money, then we already have that relationship and we're not really asking or developing it once we need the cash. So that's something that I've done, and kind of just, you never know what you're going to need and when. So working those relationships. So when a deal like this comes through, I'm not trying to find where I can get the funds from. So essentially that's what I did. I targeted some of my investors that I developed over the years, and gave them an opportunity to look at the deal and feel comfortable that this was a good opportunity for them to invest in. And, they'll get their monies back in a couple of years.
So how much cash did you have to raise?
I had to raise $200,000. That included not only the 20% down, and then the 80 was financed through a local bank. So traditional financing. So I was able to fundraise not only the 20% down payment, but also the rehab costs that I had planned out for the next 2 or 3 years. So ideally, in a perfect scenario, what'll happen is we infuse all this cash into this property, and in a couple of years go back to the bank and cash it out, refinance it, pay back my investors. And now I have a different valuation, not only on the property, but I've also paid back, the investors, and hopefully have some left over as well, to invest in other bigger deals.
Excellent. Now let's talk about the $200,000 raise. How many investors did you have to cobble that together with? Was it one? Was it three, five, 10, 20?
Yeah, so it's always like you have a list of X amount of people that you can ask money from, and then you start thinking, okay, I can ask everybody for $20,000, right? And get, what is that, 10 investors at 20,000, or try to find the one that could give us the most, and not have as many, right? So I was able to get all that from three different investors. So for me, that was a pretty big win, instead of trying to, keep going to the well and asking from others. And now it allowed me to kind of save those other relationships for other future deals, right? But it also creates an opportunity for me to continue the relationship with these three investors, to say, wow, we borrowed, say, $200,000, and in 2 or 3 years, we got our interest and our funding back. When can we do this again? Especially if they had a great experience working with myself and the deals that I'm doing. So yeah, so that's kind of, for me, I was happy with the three. And then you also always kind of have other ones that maybe on the lower end scale, and you don't want to overlook those either, because ultimately you'll need those at some point. But, just kind of continuing that funnel so that we can continue to utilize their capital. And then keeping them along the way, keeping them posted on, maybe they weren't ready for this deal, but, here's what we did with this deal, and we'll keep you in the loop for the next one.
Yeah, very smart. Telling that story and journey along the way with those people that didn't participate in that one is really smart, and something that I always advocate for, because those people that say no or it's not their cup of tea on that one deal might be an investor of yours 2 deals down the line, 3, 4, or even 10 years from now as you're scaling your empire even bigger. So that's really smart. Where did those 3 investors come from? I mean, were they people that had placed capital with you before, or were there some new people? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so all three would be folks that I've used in the past on a much smaller scale. There were the $20,000 investors, or 30,000 back, 5 years ago or 4 years ago, when I
Mhm.
purchased the other units. So it's almost like you taste, right? You get a little taste and you develop that relationship. They get their money back, they get their interest, usually better than the market. And it's a guaranteed rate, and you get your money back, right? So the ability to perform, is huge, right? It's similar to a bank, right? If you pay your mortgage and everything's on time, when you go back to the bank, maybe you'll ask a lot more. They'll be
Mhm.
more than inclined to give you that bigger loan. So for in this particular case, I was able to get that, and commit to a larger amount versus kind of their typical 20 or $30,000.
Excellent. So let's back up a little bit with these relationships. Where did those start? Because I mean, this was a little bit easier of an ask. You had a track record with these people. Were these all three of them were like alumni, or kind of what bucket were they in from a like a relationship standpoint, and how they originally started with you?
Yeah, so I this relationship goes back to my RIT days, to my fraternity. They're all fraternity brothers. So that's something that, back when we were in RIT, you're thinking different things, right? And other stuff. But still with the business mindset, right? I've always been able to maintain those relationships. And through our fraternity, I mean, we're a very close knit chapter here in Rochester. We meet once a year here during Brick City, the homecoming weekend at RIT. That just
Mhm,
happened last weekend. So we try to foster those relationships throughout the year. And over time, they see what I'm doing, and they want to get into real estate, but they're not really. They don't want to own anything. They're just like, hey, I have cash now that I'm doing X, Y, Z in other parts of the country, and I have cash available. I see what you're doing. I trust you. I like you, and let's do business together.
what was that rewinding the clock a little bit, what was that what did that original ask look like when you first raised from these people? How did that go? Was it like, "Hey, I'm investing in real estate. Do you wanna do you wanna partner with me in some way?" I kinda wanna get in the granular thing is in terms of that conversation you originally had with them, because it was probably something that was not completely comfortable for you. So I just wanna dig into that a little bit to add some value on those people in the audience that are looking to raise capital themselves.
Yeah, I mean, so when it comes to asking for money, I would say that's probably the most uncomfortable part of what I do, and just my own nature. That's not what I yes enjoy the most doing. I know it's part of the business, but it's one of those things. Again, if that's where I want to head to in terms of my own portfolio, I know that's an area that I need to develop. And initially, it's one of those you just kind of kick the can down the street, right? Kind of wait for the absolute last opportunity that you have to do this just because I didn't want to. And so I started with the list, and then say, okay, who can give me the biggest funds, and I
Mhm,
know the most as well, that I'm more comfortable with. And
mhm,
and some of these folks, before I even ask for money, they see what you're doing, and you just have to be mindful of the conversations that you're having with these folks, because if you come to me mad and when you're asking me what I'm doing, and what I'm doing in Rochester or real estate, and then sometimes you might, maybe you'll throw in, hey, just let me know whenever you have another deal coming or something like that, and kind of just make a note of that conversation. So I was making notes of different conversations throughout the years, so that, when I went to them and asked for funds, it wasn't so much of a, surprise, right? It was more of a, hey, we've had the conversation a couple years ago or at the homecoming weekend, and you mentioned you wanted to get in real estate. What is it that you wanted to get into? Is it owning? Is it the financing? And kind of getting a little deeper as to what is it that they want from them, for them and their
mhm,
business, before I started kind of saying, this is what I'm looking for. And can we
mhm,
marry those two things together? So that's kind of how, again, keeping track of those conversations and the networking piece is huge. So when, I go to meetups or different things, I try to document as much as I can from conversations that I've had, just so that when you go back to them, one, if I go back to you and say, hey, I remember, meeting up at the FRIA meeting and we talked about XYZ, now you know that I really, one, I paid attention to our conversation. I somehow documented or remember. So I valued it versus just kind of in passing, as we often do. And then it creates another level of trust, right? Because now that I'm organized, that I remember stuff, and I can really execute on certain things. So it's all these little kind of puzzles that kind of come together, that for me at the time, I really wasn't sure how they would all fit. But as I started growing the portfolio, it certainly has become important to maintain.
Now, social media is sort of a newer thing with you in terms of letting people know in your sphere of influence as to what you're doing in real estate. And this is something that we work together. What types of it was maybe a little bit uncomfortable for you to kind of get into that, but now that you're sort of doing it more right now, like I've been watching your interaction on your social channels and that sort of thing. Have you seen anything out of that in terms of people that have reached out to you to at least ask you like, yeah, I've always been wanting to get involved with real estate investing. Can you let me know? Can you let me know more about that? Because I'm interested. Have you seen anything from that?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I mean, social media, I mean, obviously is a powerful tool if it's used correctly. And most of the time, I was just using it to for the typical stuff, family stuff, or hey, we have this event for the festival, or we have this event happening or promoting somebody else's event. So that's typically what I use it for. And then, it was more like now that I started taking real estate more seriously, I needed to kind of share with everybody that, hey, this is what I'm doing now. So that when you are having those conversations with investors or other folks, the first thing they might do is they might go to the social media page and see what is it that I'm doing? Is it, legit? Is it not? How in detail, what type of is a subject matter expert am I in real estate if I'm not even talking about it on my social media platforms? So that's certainly something that I'm still not there yet, but I want to continue to develop, and thanks in part to your assistance and other folks in our mastermind group that continue to post, and we start sharing ideas back and forth. So it's great to be able to have that cohort to share ideas. So little by little, trying to develop that comfort zone larger so that I can include other things. And, and partially is it's just kind of, I don't know if it's a cultural thing or just me. I don't like to feel like I'm bragging about stuff, and I'm very private with certain things, even though most people see me in different public lights per se, but I keep my friends very close. I keep my family obviously close. So being out there sharing some of these things is just like, I don't want to come across as bragging, but it just, I'm beginning to accept that it's not so much bragging as I want to be able to inspire others to do what I'm doing. And it's not I want to hide everything. It's more of I want to make sure that other folks see my journey from my lens, and everybody has their own. And it may not be real estate for that particular person, but it could be you're getting your architectural license, or you're buying a house for some type of project that you want to get into for youth or whatever it is. It's one of those things that is like, you never know who you're going to inspire. And those are the kind of things that I'm really focusing on now. And I've had conversations with folks that have reached out to me on the side about kind of my journey about real estate, or themselves, finding their path to real estate. It's very rewarding when I come across somebody that either has never bought something real estate wise, and they say, hey, I keep seeing your posts about real estate, and now I have a triple or something like that, or even just, and not just, but even a double or a single house. It's just the mindset of getting into real estate. And just that first one is I guess the hardest one to get into, because once you get that first one out the way, you kind of get that real estate bug, and keep developing it. But I would say, yeah, I'm having more conversations with folks about real estate, or their own personal journeys and into what they want to do. So that's the area that I want to continue developing moving forward.
Yeah. It's not bragging. If you come from the heart of to educate, entertain, or inspire, I know, Orlando, you're even though you're very public facing, as you said, you're a pretty private person. And I know it's like difficult, but for those of you listening out there, you know, unfortunately in this world, notability has become more important than credibility, right? Because with all the gurus out there and that sort of thing, with salacious quick clickbait and that sort of thing. So if you can kind of drown that out with putting that value out in the universe to educate, entertain, or inspire, you'll definitely keep top of mind with people as that subject matter expert, or also help them along their journey too. So we're wrapping up the recorded part of the version here, just in terms of parting words, Orlando. For those of investors out there that maybe have a couple properties that know they need to scale big to reach big financial goals like financial freedom or financial independence, what's your recommendation to them?
I would say, put yourself in networks that will get you that mindset. Surround yourself with folks that are like-minded in terms of what they're doing. For me, it was about, again, surrounding myself with people that were like 5 years or 10 years ahead of myself. For example, if I saw myself in UMAT, 5 years ago, it's like, how can I gravitate towards your network and trying to figure out how you got there? And maybe I could get there in 2 years instead of five, right? So for me, is like going to those meetups and free and other networks that are out there for real estate, or other ones that, whatever else that your interest is, it doesn't need to be real estate, I guess, but find whatever that niche their niche is for your particular interest and just go. And for me, it was nerve wracking at first trying to go to these networks and not knowing anybody. But after a while of going two, three, four times, again, you start developing those relationships and they might key you into different things that you might be able to do and really accelerate, your own aspirations.
Excellent. Well, that being said, we're going to wrap up with the recorded version here. We want to get to our live Q&A with our live studio audience that are patiently waiting in the backstage here. So if you're listening to this right now and you want to get on live Q&A with real estate titans like Orlando Ortiz, Gino Barbaro, Reed Goosens, Matt Faircloth. I mean, we just had absolute movers and shakers in the real estate industry that want to give back to you. So you got to join the Go Big Live Real Estate Investors group on Facebook to get in on live Q&A sessions just like this. So that being said, thanks for coming, Orlando. Signing out.